85, 15% kind of thing. He's a priest 85% of the time and a clinical counselor 15%, and I do the exact opposite. My flicker's not working. Oh, okay. Pointing in the wrong place. No. Maybe I could just get you to hit the. Yes, we're here now. Binge eating disorder has been defined by the National Eating Disorder Center, which is located in Canada, as being a composite of 4 different behaviors. And included in that are binge eating disorder. We also have anorexia nervosa. We have bulimia, and we also have non-specific eating disorders. So when we look at eating disorders, those are the 4 that we're talking about. The study that I did dealt specifically with binge eating disorders. Yes, binge eating disorders deals with a disease. It is a disease, and it's characterized by increasing amounts of food being taken in, a person feeling out of control, not being able to do anything about the intake of food, eating quickly and sometimes silently. Those people are generally heavier, and they don't compensate for the eating. As in anorexia nervosa and in bulimia, people tend to compensate. They tend to do things like throw up, exercise a whole lot. They compensate, but in binge eating disorder, they don't. There's also secrecy involved with the disease. They feel different than average people. And they do this, they tell me, to emotionally soothe because they feel uncomfortable or to numb their feelings. There are a number of studies that talk about cyber communities and talks about how cyber communities can contribute to group support. And I think perhaps in the interest of time, I will skip through the next couple. Yes. Okay, stop there. The slides that I just skipped through talk about other studies in field, other studies that support the use of cyber communities as a source of social support for people who do need it for overeating, for drinking, in conflict in their marriages, in their families. They need support and find it in the cyber community. The study that I did spanned 22 months and dealt with 10 women who considered themselves overeaters or binge eaters. The criteria that they used to measure their overeating was consistent with the binge eating disorder that I described earlier. They said that they gained support from each other in this community, and they felt really supported, that they were able to come together and eliminate physical and spatial and cultural boundaries that we normally think of when we think of community. Yes? Okay, yeah, just go ahead. Okay, it was a qualitative research study, and a qualitative research study dealing with grounded theory as described by Glaser and Strauss, and which deals with coding information and finding meaning in the codes that you gather. Okay, I'm just trying to see which I can skip through here. I think I can just skip through that one as well. Okay. The postings analyzed were by 10 women, and these 10 women had been present on the site for 22 months. 18 months into the study, I interviewed 4 of these women and again qualitatively analyzed the data using a system called QSR Nudist, which is a software you use to deal with large amounts of qualitative data. I found that 40% of the calls of the postings were SOS calls, save calls. 30% concerned the content and the processes of the 12-step program. 14% talked about feelings about the program and the women when they were slipping. And 15% talked about past experiences, the past experiences these women had had and how they believed they had become overeaters. Of the SOS messages, 82% of these messages were answered within a range of 20 minutes to 6 hours and 50 minutes by another member of this 10 women. Of the 15% of messages that were not answered within this period of time, they were generally answered over the weekend. It was because it was a long weekend, it was over the weekend, and people were away. There were a variety of reasons like that, but they were answered within a 2-week period. The study took place between June 2004 and April 2006. And I assumed that this was enough time for the women to bond in community in order to be able to talk to each other about these kinds of issues, but also in terms of staying, in terms of recovery. I think perhaps if they were going to leave the community, they would have left earlier than that. The others in the community lasted 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, sometimes weeks and sometimes days. The participants, there was a lot of trust and assumptions made. I didn't meet these women face to face. I didn't know their real names, and I wasn't allowed to use their handles, and their handles are their code names in this community because there was a lot of emotional investment, personal investment in their code names. And we decided earlier on that we wouldn't use these code names, and if I were to use bytes of data, I wouldn't identify them, their code names, with these bytes of data. All other information that might tie them to an actual person would be removed from bytes of data. They were 33 to 61 years. They spanned 4 countries and 2 continents. They were all female. 6 were in committed long-term relationships. 1 was single, not dating. 3 were single and dating. 5 worked full-time. 5 worked full-time. 3 worked part-time. 1 was on long-term disability and 1 not working. All signs and symptoms they described were consistent with binge eating disorder. 4 participants were interviewed. We'll skip that one. Protecting confidentiality turned out to be more cumbersome than I had ever experienced because I was dealing with an online community. I hadn't dealt with online communities before in ethical preparation and how to protect the identity of people. And I found that it was more cumbersome, and certainly there isn't a lot written in terms of ground rules around this yet. I tended to operate on the side of caution and only used information from these 10 people who had given permission, only used sound bites from these 10 women who had given permission, and of course the 4 within that group who were interviewed. 19 people agreed to participate, 12 actually started, and 10 worked with me for the 22 months. Okay, go ahead. We'll skip that one. The first critical aspect that seemed to be present in terms of these people continuing on in the process was experiencing immediacy. They were able to contribute to the experience of immediacy, and they were also able to receive from the experience of immediacy. And this verse, they told me, the self-focus they had experienced earlier. Immediacy, I have a definition, we can skip that. Okay. In addition to immediacy, there were 3 other components that seemed to contribute to these women staying with this group for the 22 months. The second was having enough time to be worth the time and energy that they put into this process. Another was a way of accessing the group when necessary. Sometimes that was late at night, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes midday when they were working. They needed a machine, they needed an internet account, they needed to be able to reach this group when they felt that it was necessary. And the fourth one is, the fourth one is face-to-face was no longer working for them. They needed something else in addition to face-to-face group. The first theme that arose, participants revealed that when they began to talk to other people in this environment, they felt credible, they felt respected, and they felt understood. The second theme, they experienced comfort, and comfort, the word comfort kept coming up over and over and over. They experienced comfort as they recognized familiar stories, attitudes, and behaviors from the other group members. The third theme, they felt that they could introduce their true selves to this community, as they were previously sometimes unable to do, even with family and friends. The fourth theme, there was a kind of, I call it cocooning, because I couldn't think of anything else to call it. This was a place where they went and they sort of hung out and they felt very soft and comfortable and comforted. They felt a sense of cocooning versus wanting to binge eat. The fifth theme, they felt acceptance, they felt a raising of their consciousness, and they started to understand that binge eating was damaging their good health as opposed to being in denial and not really looking at the effects of binge eating. Theme number 6. They were able to celebrate short-term wins with other members as opposed to feeling guilty and helpless, which they had felt previously. As some examples, the person saying, I went to the event, but I did not overeat. I was angry, but I did not overeat. They were able to consolidate the gains that they made and learn from that, versus previously thinking it's all lost, that type of attitude. One person said to another, I remember what you were able to do, what I was able to do the last time. They built on the gains that they had made. The next theme is being encouraged and encouraging, being able to ask and receive versus being self-focused. Will you contact me tomorrow? Asking for something. What did you do then? Asking. Hooray, you did it. Advocating for one another. They were more peaceful and relaxed versus having a sense of urgency and anxiety, which seemed to drive these women previously. Going to have a nice bath and read a book. The family is in crisis. I've done as much as I can do. I'm going to stop now and let them take it from here. Having and sharing a vision versus the identity being in binge eating. Having a vision of recovery, sharing the knowledge of the 12-step program, and having a vision of feeling better, being able to walk up the stairs, being able to take the children out without feeling out of breath. Self-reflection and peer reflection versus unconscious binge eating. I stopped and thought about it, whatever it was. When the person was distressed or confused or troubled before, they would have eaten. Sharing knowledge of the self versus ignoring others and isolating themselves. Having a respectful attitude versus resentment and self-pity. Let's go ahead. Experiencing hope for a normal life versus hopelessness. And they described a new normal. Yes. All the diets they had experienced had failed. They didn't do well on diets. They decided that for them, there was a new normal. To live with this binge eating disorder, but live with it in a new way. Yes? Okay. Just go ahead. This graph represents what happened to the people, or what they thought happened to the people that had left the group. They didn't experience immediacy. They didn't experience those 3 other things that I described. Go ahead. Go ahead. And those are the 4 things that it seemed were necessary for this group to stay together and to do some bonding and some healing. Go ahead. And I put all of those themes that I talked about under 3 headings: the heading of hope, the heading of identity, and the heading of relationships and connectedness. Next slide, please. Go ahead. So my little diagram looks like this. Go ahead. Once more. Okay. They came to the community, the cyber community, looking for support. They experienced these 4 things, immediacy being the most important one because it fed back into the process. And this is what they came out with. Enhanced connectedness, relationships, identity, and hope. Next slide, please. Go ahead. Yeah, just keep hitting. Okay. And I called it clanning because that's what it seemed like. It seemed like they were in a clan, these 10 people. They looked out for each other. They had their own way of talking to one another. They were clanning. And it was kind of like a community soul. They were clanning in community soul. And the other aspects of the process I talked about earlier. Go ahead. And this is pretty much the same thing. I'm just saying a few other words. You can just go ahead with that. Get past that one. I'm just trying to decide which of those to use when I write it up, okay? So I have 3 or 4 of them. Go ahead. Yes. Yes, one more. Yeah. Those are I'm going to try to get this printed off if anybody's interested in it. Those are references that I used. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Maybe if you have any questions, we'll do that later. Thank you very much.